Chapter 6. Ghost of the Castle. The Cubs of Den 2 worked hard the next week making props for their Robin Hood play. Dan assisted Mr. Holloway in blocking out scenes for the movie and was told he had done an excellent job. "We should have a chance to win first prize in the contest," the Den Dad declared late one afternoon as the boys met in the clubroom. The meeting room of Den 2 was the envy of all other Cub Scouts in Webster City. Situated high in a natural cave above the beach, it offered a fine view not only of the shoreline, but also the distant Boy Scout camp on Skeleton Island. "Yes, the play is rapidly whipping into shape," declared Sam Hatfield. "Right now, our crying need is for costumes." "I thought the mothers were going to help us out," Dan replied. "They have agreed to," the Cub leader answered. "That is, they'll sew the costumes. However, there's a little item of buying material. Can't each Cub provide his own?" "I was going to suggest that," nodded Mr. Hatfield. "I feel, though, that the money should be earned by each boy. It wouldn't be fair to ask the parents to pay for our costumes, especially as some of them will be rather elaborate." The Cub leader explained to the other boys his plan, and no one raised an objection. Chips and Red, however, were uncertain how they would earn the necessary money. "Well, you might try cutting lawns, gathering papers, or running errands," Mr. Hatfield suggested. "Give it a little thought. I'm sure you can come up with some ideas." "How soon must we have the money?" Midge asked. Mr. Hatfield said he thought it should be turned in not later than a week. "The mothers will need the material to start sewing the costumes," he declared. "Deadline for the contest is the 25th of the month." After the meeting broke up, Brad and Dan sauntered down the street together, discussing how they would earn their money. "My dad has been after me to clean the basement," Brad remarked. "Maybe I can get 50 cents for that job. It will be a start." "All the odd jobs around our place are cleaned up," Dan said thoughtfully. "It looks as if I'll have to get out and hustle." That very afternoon, he called on several neighbors, offering to wash windows or family cars. In each instance, he was politely but firmly turned down. Rather discouraged, Dan then appealed to his mother. "Maybe I can think of some jobs if you give me a little time," she said to encourage him. "Offhand, I can't think of a thing. Usually, you're 2 or 3 jobs ahead of me anyway." When Dad went to the drugstore at 6 o'clock to get a newspaper for his father, he met Fred. "How you coming on earning money?" the boy asked him. "No luck yet," Dan admitted. "Jobs seem to be mighty scarce." "I ran an errand and picked up a quarter," Fred told him. "But that's all I've been able to earn so far. Red and Chips are having a tough time too. Webster City must suddenly have been hit by a depression, Fred. I wonder how the Den 1 boys are getting their costumes. Dad told me they're earning their money too. Well, I hope they have better luck than we're having." As Dan spoke, a voice behind him demanded, "Better luck at what?" Dan and Fred turned around to see Ross Langdon standing behind them. His bicycle was parked outside the drugstore. Over his shoulder was slung a paper carrier's sack. "We're talking about earning money for our Robin Hood costumes," Fred explained. "The trouble with you fellows is you don't have any hustle and get up," Ross taunted them. "Now me, I have no difficulty raising any amount of money." "Your father will give it to you, I bet," Dan said. "Not on your life. I'm earning it." "How?" demanded Dan and Fred together. Ross tapped the canvas case over his shoulder. "I've taken on a paper route," he explained. "I start with 8 customers. Probably by the end of the week, I'll have 20 or 30. That'll give me a nice profit." Despite themselves, the other 2 Cubs were impressed. "How long have you had that route?" Fred demanded. "I just started. My father got it for me through a friend." "Gee, you're lucky," Dan said without envy. "I wish I could land one too. Any chance?" Not the slightest, Ross answered loftily. You have to think up your own ideas. Sure, I guess so, Dan admitted good-naturedly. Well, I'm glad you're all set. Running a paper route should be profitable, but it will mean a lot of hard work. Oh, I don't know, Ross shrugged. On my bike, it shouldn't take long to make deliveries. It's a cinch. And watch the money roll in. All by myself, a super Robin Hood costume that will knock your eyes out. No homemade affair for me, not on your life. Having delivered himself of this, Ross smiled in a superior way and ambled off. Even if that guy is a cub, he makes me sick, Fred muttered. When the boy was beyond hearing, he won't last long at that paper route. Dan did not think so either, but he pointed out Ross probably would stick to the job until he had acquired enough money to buy the Robin Hood costume. If he's able to buy a good one and I come up with a makeshift that shinks the role for him, said Fred, he'll get it without a doubt. Don't kid yourself, the other returned. Dad won't give the part to Ross just because he had dug up the best costume. He'll have to prove he's a better actor and archer. Dan paid for the newspaper, and the boys left the drugstore together. Don't forget, we're to go to Mr. Holloway's house tomorrow night, Fred reminded as they parted. He promised to run off those first movie scenes we took at the castle. I'll be there, Dan promised. The Den Dad had invited all the boys of both Den 1 and Den 2 to his home. On the following night, not a single cub was absent from the meeting, for all were eager to view the films. How'd they turn out, Mr. Holloway? Dan asked eagerly. Not bad, the Den Dad replied. In one of the scenes, though, a mystery has cropped up. A mystery? I'll let the boys discover it for themselves, Mr. Holloway replied. We'll see those eyes are sharp enough to spot it. Deeply puzzled by the Den Dad's remark, the cubs plied him with questions. To all, he made the same answer. Wait and see. Mr. Holloway had hung a screen in the downstairs rec room. The boys gathered in a semicircle in front of it and waited impatiently for the show to begin. The room was darkened. After testing out the focus, Mr. Holloway ran through the first scene that had been taken at the creek. The cubs howled with laughter as they watched the duel between Brad and Ross. As the latter tumbled into the water with a mighty splash, their mirth could not be controlled. Heck, I don't think it's that funny, Ross protested. Mr. Holloway ran off another scene in rapid order. The cubs remarked that Dan's acting, too, was especially good, and that Brad, too, had acted his role very well. What's the mystery you were telling us about? Midge demanded, when only one more scene remained to be shown. Wait and see, smiled Mr. Holloway. Watch sharp now. Again the room was darkened. Mr. Holloway began showing of the banquet scene with the castle and the forest as background. Say, Ross is good at the Sheriff of Nottingham, exclaimed Midge. It's a natural part for him. Like fun, growled Ross. I'm going to be Robin Hood. So engrossed were the boys in watching themselves in the scene, they almost forgot, and before they realized it, the film had been running off. Well, inquired Mr. Holloway, who caught it? Caught what? Asked Red in perplexity. I didn't notice anything, declared Chips. Dan spoke quietly. I'm not sure, Mr. Holloway. The film went so fast, but I thought I did see something unusual. Ah, you're making that up, challenged Ross. What did Bunny Bright Eyes see? I wasn't in the foreground, Dan said slowly. Just for an instant, I thought I caught a flash of a face back in the bushes. So what? Demanded Ross, getting up from the floor. Cubs were all over the place. This didn't look like one of our boys. The face wasn't clear, but I'm sure it was no one I'd ever seen before. As Ross was on the verge of making another jibe, Mr. Holloway said quickly, Dan is right. The camera lens picked up an extra character. Dan and Brad exchanged glances. At the same thought occurred to them both at once. Then, I didn't imagine that someone was hiding out in the bushes watching us, Dan exclaimed. It must have been that crack shot, the ghost of the castle. Do, 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 do.